All right, so the Eucharist. How is Jesus fully fully body, blood, soul, and divinity in the little wafer bread in Catholicism? Oh, he is. So in Genesis, in the garden, in Genesis 3, you see the fall of mankind. And as a result of that decision, that willed decision to go against God's will, you see the putting on of the mortal coil. The skins were in. You see a division between the material and the spiritual. You see an exile into this, exile, away from heaven, which is God, by the way, the heavenly state. So you see division. There's no unity. It's not universal. Nothing sacred anymore. So that is the human condition. Is a big mess, and it is a willed state after the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus. It is an inherited state because Adam was our origin, materially and spiritually, as is every man, woman, and child. So from father to son to father to son and father to son, you are generated, kind of like Genesis. Even the word Genesis and the chapters where within, you'll see that generation time and time again through that whole New Testament of the fall of Noah, the fall of David. You just see it, over and over and over again. You see this, that covenant that's being formed. Man reaches a pinnacle, and his inherited state, spiritual state, brings that material way back down. In Jesus, you get a new covenant. So he's coming to not only complete what was, trying to be formed during all those mess-ups. He literally is what God's waiting for. The fullness of time. He is the covenant. Literally, spiritually, and materially. The covenant is actually God. So materially, the covenant is God. So his flesh, his body, when God speaks, words become being. They become into being, like you see in creation. He is so incredibly, the power is like beyond human comprehension, where he creates out of nothing, and we only create out of what he makes, because we're his creatures. So, and then spiritually, it's the same thing. And those two things are intertwined and hypostatic in Jesus, the new covenant, the temple of God, what do we have? We have Jesus. So, in the Last Supper, you see this institution of not only the Eucharist, but the priesthood. And then shortly thereafter, you're seeing this crucifixion. He's doing the opposite materially of what you see Adam spiritually do with his heart. So his heart is pierced, he sacrifices, he suffers, he's of service. He gives his whole entire life, his material and spiritual life, to God on behalf of all of fallen creation, as a one and only sacrifice. And it's God, sacrificing God to God. So keep that mindset when we're going to go move into the Eucharist. So material and spiritually, he's doing this, and he's resurrecting the sacred, unified, universal vision. Not only resurrecting that, but like bringing into existence the pinnacle of that vision. Whereas through all of history of creation, Jesus is actually the pinnacle. And we're all in that. So everything is gonna, everything good and that conforms with God's will and communion is actually coming from him, in that pinnacle of God's will and of God. So if we are still in our lesson here, we're still in exile because each of us has to go through that resurrection through Christ and in Christ. He, through our baptism, becomes that, he is that lifeline and of all light and reason in God, and without that we're dead. So we are working to become like him. And how do you do that? You are what you eat, basically. Materially, you are what you eat. And spiritually, you have to have faith that you're spiritually what you eat too. And on the earth, you know, I am half pierogies and cheese. And if I listen to like heavy metal music all day and all night, you know, I'm going to be like what I'm consuming. So it's the state of humanity. We are a container that gets filled. We consume either good here, or our consumption is evil. Well, it's God's will that we are to consume, masticate, and have Jesus enter us in Holy Communion. So it's almost like a marital act where in that consumption, both spiritually and materially, we become what we are consuming. So our life is a life of adoring God throughout our day and the small tasks we do. But in addition, spiritually and materially, it's to be the same thing. So when the priest is consecrating, when Jesus is consecrating through the priest on the altar, the Holy Eucharist, the covenant, the New Testament, the communion with God, the reconciliation, we need that often. And what you're receiving in the form of food is Jesus as our food. because materially we have to resurrect for real, and spiritually we have to resurrect by our consumption for real. So he is weekly, or as much as we possibly can, even daily, we are literally going to Mass, which is a very formal and very ancient prayer of thanksgiving, adoration, reconciliation with God. We're going back into covenant with God. And that prayer, that new covenant, that New Testament Jesus, is absolutely present through that whole prayer and of the liturgy and the Eucharist, and that's what we're receiving. Now, after receiving, we are to go out into the world and do the same thing in memory of Him. So essentially, you are agreeing to be like and become like Christ in the world. So it's a really, really big deal. So I have chosen to give my life to the people who God sends to me to feed and to tend and to protect and teach and so on, as best as I can and through the graces He gives me, as a child of Him, in the image of Christ. The better we do this and follow this model we've been given, the quicker and the easier we move through this very difficult existence and go home to God, period. And in that heaven, the eschaton is what we would call it, heaven or hell or purgatory. In our eschaton, in that original that first judgment, God is going to look at our hearts, and Jesus will judge whether or not, how familiar is who we are to Him. How well did we consume Him? How well did we do that here? And that's kind of our test, is that Eucharist. So, not only is the full body, blood, soul, and divinity of Christ in that very humiliating little wafer of the entire universe, it is a very, very good reminder of how we are to be in the world. Unassuming, humble, food for others to live off of or from. So we create life and not death. So we're to give our whole body, blood, soul, and divinity into the will of God, like Adam should have and was called to do, and to do that for all of creation too. So that's how He is. That's probably not all of it, but that's where I'm at now with what the Eucharist is. The other thing is He's always present in every single tabernacle all over the world all the time. So you have that incarnation, which is the first coming. You have this, the final coming of Jesus, I'm going to say. And then you have Him here in the Eucharist all the time to restore us as our nourishment, spiritually and materially. So that is in the tabernacle of any Catholic church. So make sure to pay respects, because the whole entire throne of God exists spiritually in every Catholic church in the tabernacle. So make sure you stop in and say hi, and when you leave in, you stop in and say bye. And if you ever have a bad time of things, feel free to go into any Catholic church and just sit. And in your mind's eye, see the throne of God with Jesus sitting on it, and you can have all the conversation with him as you want in the world. And make sure to take communion in a state of grace. So use your confession. Use your sacrament of confession, because you don't want to be all spiritually a jerk going up and going into consummation with Jesus on Sunday. It's not a good idea. You would just be crucifying him and making your own soul worse every Sunday. So, thanks. Bye.